Rain slammed against the glass walls of the lake house, blurring the world outside into streaks of silver and shadow. Inside, the power flickered, casting brief flashes over the modern furniture and the lone man kneeling on the cold floor. Ethan Vale's breath came in shallow gasps. His shirt clung to him, damp with sweat, though the air was freezing. He pressed his palms against the marble, trying to ground himself, but his hands trembled uncontrollably. The pain wasn't physical this time. It was memory roaring back with every thunderclap. Somewhere in the darkness he heard footsteps, soft, careful, uninvited. Ethan, a woman's voice, called low and steady. The sound cut through the storm like a pulse of light. "Don't come closer," he rasped. His voice cracked. "Don't touch me." He looked up. Standing by the doorway was Claire Monroe, her hair damp from the rain, her coat still dripping. Lightning illuminated her face, concern, mixed with something more fragile, something he hadn't seen in anyone's eyes for years, compassion. "You're having an episode," she said quietly. "Let me help you breathe." "No," he said, clutching his temples. "You can't fix this. You don't understand." "Then make me," she said, stepping forward. He recoiled his back, hitting the edge of the sofa. The storm outside howled louder, as if the sky itself was mocking his fear. Claire stopped a few feet away. Her eyes locked on him. "Ethan, you're not dying," she said. "It's a panic attack." "No, it's punishment," he spat. "Every time someone touches me, it feels like burning." His voice trembled. "You think you can cure that?" "Maybe not," she whispered, "but I can stand with you through it." He shook his head violently. "Don't touch me." He repeated louder this time, a plea wrapped in command. The sound echoed off the glass walls. Thunder cracked overhead, and for a moment the entire house plunged into darkness. Claire took a step closer. "Then let me hold your fear," she said, voice trembling but sure. She crouched down slowly, keeping her distance, but lowering herself to his level. The air between them was electric, fragile, as if one wrong breath could shatter it. Ethan's chest heaved. His pupils were wide, reflecting the candlelight that flickered back on as the generator restarted. The golden light made him look less like a billionaire and more like a broken man, lost in his own fortress. Claire reached out not to touch him, but to let her hand hover inches above his. "Match my breathing," she whispered. "In and out." He hesitated, then followed. The rhythm steadied, two strangers breathing in sync, while the world outside drowned in rain. His body slowly unclenched, his pulse settling beneath the surface of fear. When he finally dared to meet her eyes, he saw no pity there, only fierce steadiness. "Why didn't you leave?" he asked hoarsely. "Because you're not alone in this room," she said. "You're not your fear, Ethan." He let out a sound, half laugh, half sob. The storm quieted, just enough to let the silence between them stretch. "You shouldn't be here," he said finally. "No one should see me like this." "Then it's a good thing I don't follow rules," Claire replied, her lips curling faintly. Another flash of lightning painted the room white, and for a second he saw her hand, small and trembling, still hovering near his, not touching, just there. His breathing hitched again, not from panic this time, but from something deeper, something terrifying in its gentleness. "You don't know what you're doing," he murmured. "Maybe not." She admitted softly, "But you're the first person in a long time who looks more afraid of love than of pain." The generator hummed. The rain softened to a whisper. Ethan felt the weight of his isolation press against him like a tide. He had spent years building walls of glass and steel, believing they made him untouchable. But now, kneeling in front of this woman who refused to walk away, those walls began to crack. "You don't understand," he said again, quieter. "Every time someone reached out, they wanted something. Money, power, a story. No one ever meant it." Claire didn't respond right away. She looked around the massive room, empty, perfect, sterile. "Then maybe it's time someone touches you without wanting anything back," she said. The words hit him harder than the thunder. He swallowed, eyes burning. "Why are you here, Claire?" She tilted her head. "Maybe because I know what it's like to lose someone to their own mind." He stared at her. "You think I can be saved? I think you've been waiting for someone to try," she said simply. Outside, the storm began to fade, its fury giving way to a quiet drizzle. Inside, the tension broke not with touch, but with understanding. Claire slowly lowered her hand until it rested lightly over his. The moment stretched like eternity. Ethan froze. Every muscle in his body screamed to pull away. But something stronger held him there. Warmth, not pain, not shame, just warmth. His lips parted in disbelief. "How because you let me," she whispered. He exhaled a trembling breath. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a patient or a freak. He felt human. When he looked up, her face was close too close, and yet he didn't move. In her eyes, he saw not curiosity, not pity, but recognition. Two broken mirrors reflecting the same crack. Then, as his breathing slowed, the world blurred again, not from fear but exhaustion. "Sleep," she said softly. "You're safe." He didn't protest this time. As the last flicker of lightning faded, his body went still against the marble floor, her hand still resting over his. His mind for once didn't fight the calm, fade out. 2 weeks earlier, voiceover. They called him untouchable. They were right until she came. Morning light filtered through rain-streaked glass, spilling across the vast living room like liquid silver. The world beyond the window was gray and wet, a reflection of Ethan Vale's own stillness. He stood barefoot on the polished floor, a black mug untouched in his hand, eyes fixed on the surface of Lake Washington, where the ripples vanished into fog. Silence was his only companion. He liked it that way. The house, all glass and metal, responded to his voice, but not his heart. Curtains slid open, lights dimmed, doors unlocked at command. Yet nothing human crossed his threshold. The last person who had tried had left him with scars no doctor could stitch. Ethan adjusted the cuff of his tailored shirt, slipped on his gloves, and turned away from the window. He never touched anything without them. To outsiders, they were an eccentric habit of a billionaire technologist, a man obsessed with hygiene and precision. To him, they were armor. The faint texture of leather reminded him that distance could be controlled, that skin would not betray him again. In the mirrored wall of his private gym, his reflection looked flawless. Broad shoulders, steady stance, the image of power. But he knew what lay beneath a body that betrayed him with every pulse, a body that reacted too violently to touch. He could fix code rewrite algorithms, build artificial empathy for machines. Yet the human equation eluded him. He could not reprogram shame. He had spent years perfecting the illusion of stability. Board meetings by hologram contracts signed digitally, dates canceled politely. When the tabloids called him the ghost billionaire, he felt relief instead of insult. Ghosts could not be touched. His assistant Miles arrived, his reflection appearing in the mirrored glass. "Morning, sir. The investors are waiting in the conference link." Ethan nodded without turning. "Send the presentation? They'd prefer if you joined in person this quarter," Miles said carefully. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then remind them I own the company, not the other way around. Miles hesitated, then left quietly. The sound of the door sliding shut, echoing through the emptiness. Ethan exhaled. Every conversation felt like a negotiation with the world to leave him alone. He moved through his home as if tracing invisible boundaries he had drawn long ago. No one crossed the red zone, his personal space. Not maids, not bodyguards, not doctors. He had built this fortress after the night the woman he trusted most laughed at him under fluorescent light, calling him defective. That laughter still haunted him, looping in his mind like corrupted data. The echo followed him into the shower, the gym, the endless nights of insomnia. He had not been touched since. By mid-morning, the rain thickened. He sat at his desk facing 3 screens filled with code graphs and muted news anchors discussing his company's stock performance. A small headline scrolled at the bottom: Neurosphere founder, rumored to suffer from anxiety disorder. He muted the feed. The world loved to diagnose the rich. They could not stand the idea that wealth did not buy peace. He leaned back, pressing gloved fingers to his temples. The constant hum of the smart house was comforting the soft clicks of machines obeying him unlike people. He opened a file marked Human Interface Project. Lines of code filled the screen, an AI model designed to simulate emotional understanding in robotic companions. Teach them how to care, he had told his engineers. But as he reread the algorithms, he realized he was trying to teach machines what he himself could not feel. The irony tasted bitter. Noon passed unnoticed until a tremor ran through his hand. He ignored it, typed faster, but the shaking worsened. The monitor blurred. His chest tightened as if the walls were closing in. Not again, he thought. Not now. He reached for the drawer, fumbling for his medication, but the pill bottle slipped. Tablets scattered across the floor. His vision darkened. For a heartbeat, he saw his reflection in the glass wall, a man crumbling inside his own perfection. Then the world tilted. When he woke, the room was dimmer, quieter, the hum of machines replaced by a low beeping sound. His personal AI assistant had triggered emergency protocol. A medical drone hovered near scanning him, but he waved it away. "Cancel call," he croaked. The AI hesitated. "Vital signs unstable." "I said cancel," he barked, dragging himself upright. The world steadied, but his pulse raced. He stared again at the window, at the faint outline of rain. Each droplet looked like a fingerprint, sliding down the glass touch that did not hurt. He laughed once hollowly. You could fix any code, he whispered to his reflection, except the one in your own heart. His voice cracked. Outside the lake rippled, swallowing the echo. He turned back to the desk, gloves still on, and resumed typing as if work could drown the ghost of that truth. When Miles returned that evening to deliver the day's reports, Ethan pretended nothing had happened. He wore the same calm mask, the same measured voice. "Tomorrow's meeting will be remote," he said. "Always is," Miles muttered under his breath as he left. Ethan heard it, but said nothing. Once alone, he dimmed the lights. The house responded instantly, walls fading into shadow, until only his reflection remained. He studied it one last time, tracing the outline of his face on the cold glass without removing the glove. "If no one touches me," he whispered, "maybe I'll never break again." Yet even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. The ache in his chest was proof enough. Rain returned to Seattle like it had been waiting for him to fall again. 2 days after the incident, Ethan sat in the conference room of his company's headquarters. his face pale under the artificial lights. Screens glowed around him, displaying investors from across the world. His voice sounded detached as he discussed profits and neural simulations, but every syllable felt like glass in his throat. He had memorized the rhythm of pretending. When the call ended, his assistant, Miles, rushed in panic, barely hidden. "Sir, the hospital still recommends you see a specialist." They sent over a list of private practitioners. Ethan didn't look up. "Delete it. You fainted," Ethan, Miles pressed. "You can't keep ignoring it." Ethan's gloved hand froze midair, then resumed typing. "People faint," he said flatly. "They don't need an audience afterward." But by evening, when his pulse raced again and his chest tightened until the room spun, he realized denial couldn't keep him standing. The next morning, a black car stopped in front of the Vale estate. A woman stepped out carrying a single leather bag. She wore no jewelry, no perfume, and her hair was tied neatly. Her expression was calm, but not cold. Dr. Claire Monroe was not impressed by wealth. She had seen every shade of human fragility before: the soldier who couldn't sleep without a weapon under his pillow, the violinist who cut her own hand to stop herself from playing, the CEO who cried whenever his phone rang. Pain didn't scare her, pretension did. When she entered the house, she noticed how quiet it was. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. The kind where even the walls seemed to whisper, "No one lives here." A digital voice greeted her politely, announcing her presence to its master. She followed the automated directions through glass corridors till she reached a room that felt more like a museum than a home office. Ethan stood by the window, facing the lake. The reflection of rain shimmered on the floor beneath him. He didn't turn around. "You're wasting your time," he said. "I didn't invite you." "Your assistant did," she replied calmly. "He thinks you might want to talk to someone who doesn't work for you." Ethan finally looked over his shoulder. "Do you always diagnose before the patient speaks?" "No," she said, setting her bag down. "But I can tell when someone rehearses indifference." Their eyes met for the first time. Hers were gray, steady, and curious, like they'd learned to study pain without judgment. His were dark, sharp, and defensive, like a blade kept polished from fear of rusting. "Do you fear pain?" she asked softly, "or being seen?" His jaw tightened. Both. Silence expanded between them, thick as fog. She didn't fill it. She opened her notepad instead. "We'll start with observation," she said. "No touching, no medication, no assumptions. I just want to understand how you live." "You won't," he muttered. "You can't." "That's what everyone says right before they start talking." Her tone wasn't mocking, just factual. She began walking slowly around the room, taking mental notes. The perfectly aligned books, the flowers wilting. In a vase that hadn't been changed, the scent of sterilized air. No photographs, no clutter, no signs of life. Only order and silence. "You like control," she said. "It's the only thing that doesn't leave. You think I'm afraid of losing control." "No," she said, meeting his gaze again. "I think you're afraid of what might happen if you don't have to keep it." He looked away first. The rain pressed harder against the glass, filling the silence she refused to break. When the session ended, she packed her bag quietly. "Same time tomorrow," she said. "That won't be necessary. It usually isn't." She replied, her tone light but certain. "Until it is." She left without another word, her reflection fading down the corridor. Ethan stood where she'd left him, staring at the dying flowers. That night, for reasons he couldn't name, he ordered fresh ones. The next day, Claire returned. He almost told security to send her away, but curiosity betrayed him. This time she asked to see the rest of the house. He agreed reluctantly. As they walked through the vast halls, she asked simple questions: what he ate, how long he slept, what he thought about when he couldn't. He answered briefly, deflecting whenever she got too close. Yet she noticed everything, the faint tremor in his hand when she mentioned intimacy, the way his eyes lingered on the world outside but never on people. In the kitchen, she paused near the counter where a single coffee mug sat untouched. "You drink alone?" she asked. "Always, because solitude is comforting or because company isn't." He frowned. "You ask too many questions. That's what you pay me for." "I didn't hire you," he reminded her. "Not yet." "Then fire me," she said. He didn't. Later in his study, she caught sight of a photo frame turned face down on a shelf. "Who's that?" "No one," he said too quickly. She picked it up anyway, revealing a younger Ethan, smiling beside a woman with laughing eyes. "Your mother. She left," he said. "Or maybe I did. Depends who you ask." She placed it back gently. "Do you ever miss her?" "No, liar." The word was soft, not cruel, but it made him inhale sharply. "You think you can read me?" he asked. "I think I just did," she replied. He laughed bitterly. "You're either fearless or foolish. I've been both," she said. The clock chimed softly in the corner, marking the end of the hour. She gathered her things, and as she reached the door, she turned to him. "You're not your condition, Ethan." He looked up, startled by the quiet conviction in her voice. "Then what am I?" "Someone who's forgotten what kindness feels like." She left before he could reply. For a long moment he stood still, staring at the closed door. Then he looked at the vase again, at the fresh flowers he'd ordered out of impulse. Their petals were already beginning to open. He found himself wondering if she would notice. That night he dreamt of rain again, but this time it didn't drown him. It washed the glass clean. The third session began with silence, the kind that carried both resistance and curiosity. Claire arrived to find Ethan already awake, standing before a massive mirror in his private gym. The morning light poured through the glass walls, breaking into soft angles across his reflection. He wasn't looking at himself so much as through himself, as if searching for the man he'd lost somewhere between shame and survival. "You're early," he said without turning. "You're awake," she replied. "That's progress." He didn't smile. "Sleep is overrated." She set her bag down and moved closer, stopping just short of his comfort line. "You work out at dawn," she said. "Do you feel stronger afterward or emptier?" "Depends on the day," he said, grabbing a towel. "Sometimes both." "May I ask a different kind of question?" "Today," she said, "you always do. Why do you hate your reflection?" His hand froze mid-motion. "I don't," he said too fast. "I just don't see the point of looking." "You built an empire on observation, Ethan. Every line of code you write is about how people behave, yet you can't stand seeing your own face." He turned then, meeting her gaze in the mirror instead of directly. "What are you trying to do?" "Something called mirror exposure therapy," she said. "It's not about vanity, it's about acceptance." He laughed once hollowly. "Acceptance? You think a mirror can fix trauma." "No," she said softly, "but it can stop you from pretending it isn't there." She gestured toward the mirror. "Sit." He hesitated, then obeyed, lowering himself onto the bench in front of the glass. The silence between them stretched until the sound of rain against the windows filled it. "Close your eyes," she said. "Tell me what you see." He inhaled sharply. "A man everyone wants to touch for the wrong reason." "What else? A body that doesn't listen. A mind that punishes it." His fingers flexed unconsciously against his knees. "It's too much sometimes." "That's why I'm here," she said gently. "To make it less." "You can't. Then let's just try to see." She stood behind him, their reflections overlapping. "Open your eyes." He did. "Now describe what you see." "A mistake," he whispered. "A man who looks fine to everyone else, but knows he's broken underneath." Claire stepped closer, her voice quiet but firm. "That's one version. Try again." He frowned, confused. "What, describe yourself without the story," she said. "No trauma, no diagnosis, just features." He exhaled slowly. "Brown hair, blue eyes, 34, scar on my left shoulder." "Good. Keep going. Tired." "That's not a feature," she said. "It's a feeling." He smiled faintly despite himself. "You're persistent, and you're avoiding." "Maybe," he admitted. She circled to stand beside him, her reflection aligned with his. "Tell me about the scar." "Skiing accident." He lied. "Try again." He met her gaze in the mirror. "Someone I trusted hurt me," he said finally. "Not physically, but it left a mark anyway." "That's the only kind of scar worth seeing," she said quietly. Their eyes met in the reflection, and something unspoken flickered, empathy, not pity. She knew the language of pain too well to misuse it. "You said everyone who tried to touch you wanted something," she said. "What do you think I want? I don't know yet," he said honestly. "That's progress." She handed him a small sensor device. "Let's measure your pulse." He hesitated, then slipped off one glove. His hand trembled slightly as he let her attach the clip to his finger. The machine hummed softly, recording the rhythm of his heart. "What does it say?" he asked. "That you're human," she said with a small smile. He rolled his eyes, but the tension in his shoulders eased. As she packed up, he surprised himself by asking, "Why did you become a therapist?" She paused, fingers stilling. "Because I couldn't save someone I loved," she said. He was sick, but the real disease was fear. He couldn't bear to be touched near the end. "I thought if I could understand that fear, I might not lose another person to it." Ethan studied her reflection. "Did you? I'm still trying," she said. The honesty in her voice was raw, disarming. For the first time, he wanted to ask more. "And you think helping me helps you?" "I think helping anyone helps me," she said softly. "But you're different. Because I'm rich." "Because you're still fighting," she said. "Most people stop." When she left that day, she forgot her scarf on the bench. Ethan noticed it later, folded neatly beside the mirror. He picked it up, the faint scent of lavender clinging to it. For a long time he stared at it, unsure why he didn't throw it away. That night he sat again before the mirror, the scarf beside him, the rain whispering outside. He removed one glove and pressed his fingertips against the glass. His reflection met him halfway, fingers aligned through the surface. It was the closest thing to touch he'd allowed himself in years. The next morning Claire returned, slightly out of breath from the storm. She noticed her missing scarf immediately. "You kept it?" she said, surprised. "It seemed wrong to throw it out," he said. "Or maybe you didn't want to let go." "You read too much into things," he muttered. "That's literally my job." He looked at her, then truly looked, and for the first time she saw something shift, resignation, softening into recognition. He wasn't healed, not even close, but a door had opened. "How do you do it?" he asked quietly. "Carry everyone's pain without breaking." "Who says I don't break?" she replied. "I just do it quietly." The session ended with him agreeing to continue mirror therapy. As she left, she glanced at him through the reflection. "You're starting to see yourself differently," she said. Maybe, he answered. Or maybe I'm just seeing what you see. That night, the house felt less empty. The mirror no longer looked like an enemy, but like a window he could finally breathe through. Outside, the lake reflected the faintest streak of sunlight breaking through gray. For the first time in years, he didn't close the blinds. The fifth session began under a sky bruised with clouds, the kind that carried thunder in their bones. Claire had planned to leave early, but the forecast warned of a storm, strong enough to close the floating bridge. When she arrived at Ethan's estate, the lake had already turned restless gray waves slapping the dock. Inside the smart house flickered uncertainly, its systems struggling against the wind. "You shouldn't have come," Ethan said as he met her at the door. His shirt sleeves were rolled up his eyes, shadowed but alert. "The roads will flood." "You say that every time you're scared," she replied calmly, setting down her bag. "Then let's make the fear useful." He sighed, the sound heavy. "There's nothing useful about what's inside my head." "That's where you're wrong." She smiled faintly, but the tension between them was fragile. The storm pressed against the windows like a living thing. Rain ran down the glass in frantic rivers. Lightning illuminated the room in strobe flashes. The sessions started quietly, each word competing with the growl of thunder. Claire asked him to describe what fear felt like inside his body. He said it was electricity, unpredictable and cruel. "It hits me before I can prepare," he said, pacing. "Like a current under my skin. Sometimes I think it's punishment for being too much." "Too much what?" "Too much of everything," he said sharply. "Too much money, too much body, too much attention. People stare, they whisper, and when they realize I'm not the man they imagined, they turn disgust into pity." "And you think if no one gets close, they can't reject you," she said. "Exactly." The power flickered again, and for a moment they stood in complete darkness. The hum of electronics vanished, leaving only rain and their breathing. "Backup generator should kick in," Ethan murmured. It didn't. "I think that's our cue to stop for today," Claire said, though her voice was soft, not fearful. "The bridge is closed," Ethan reminded her. "You'll have to stay." He turned away, trying to hide the unease that came with proximity. He had spent years designing this house to be a fortress, but now that it held another heartbeat, it felt unbearably small. Claire lit a few candles from the kitchen, the flame trembling with each gust. "Where are your emergency lights?" she asked. "In the basement," he said, "but I'd rather wait." "You don't like the dark?" "I don't like memories," he said. "Darkness brings them back." She looked at him, then candlelight brushing over his face, softening the edges of control. "Maybe it's time to let them come." Lightning cracked outside, bright enough to slice the room in half. The sound that followed was deafening. Somewhere upstairs, glass shattered. Ethan flinched violently, hands to his ears, his breath catching like a trapped animal. "Ethan," Claire said, stepping toward him. "Don't," he gasped. "Don't touch me." His voice was raw, pleading. He backed away until his shoulder hit the glass wall. "It's fine," she said quietly. "Then I'll just sit here until you're not afraid anymore." She sank onto the floor a few feet away, legs crossed, hands resting on her knees. The storm raged a symphony of thunder and rain, but her stillness anchored the room. Ethan's breathing came in jagged bursts. "I can't," he whispered. "Every time someone gets close, it feels like drowning." "Then don't swim," she said softly. "Just breathe." He tried. In, out. The rhythm fought him at first, but her calm voice filled the silence between the thunderclaps. "You're here," she murmured. "You're safe. You don't know that," he said, his voice shaking. "I do," she said, Because I'm here too." For a long time neither spoke. The wind howled, the rain hammered, and the glass trembled like the house itself was holding its breath. Slowly the trembling in his hands began to subside. "Look at me," she said. He did reluctantly. The candlelight painted her eyes gold. "What do you see?" she asked. "Someone who doesn't flinch," he said. "Someone who should have run by now." "Maybe I'm just stubborn." "No," he said. "You're kind, and that's rarer." The words startled both of them. He had meant them as truth, but truth spoken aloud felt dangerous. Another flash of lightning lit the room, followed by an explosion of thunder so close it shook the floor. Ethan gasped, collapsing to his knees. Instinct overrode reason. Claire reached for him. "Don't," he said, voice cracking. But she didn't stop. She knelt beside him, close enough for him to feel the warmth radiating from her body. "Then let me hold your fear," she whispered, repeating the words she would say again one night soon. Her hand hovered inches from his chest before she finally touched him flat palm over his heart. He froze. His pulse pounded against her skin while desperate. For a moment he thought he might die, but her touch didn't hurt. It didn't burn. It steadied him. "Breathe," she said. He did, though it came out as a shudder. The thunder rolled again, but it was distant now. "It's just touch, Ethan," she said softly. Not desire, not shame. His eyes fluttered closed. The sensation was unfamiliar but not unwelcome. A tear slipped from the corner of his eye before he realized it was happening. "I don't know how to do this," he said hoarsely. "You don't have to," she whispered. "Just don't run." They stayed like that for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. The storm raging outside, the quiet storm inside, finally beginning to break. When the generator roared to life, the lights flickered on, revealing them, still sitting close, her hand over his chest, his fingers loosely around her wrist. He blinked at the sudden brightness, dazed. "You can let go now," he said, though the words lacked conviction. "Only if you want me to," she replied. He hesitated, then nodded. She withdrew her hand slowly. The imprint of warmth lingered, a ghost of connection. He looked down, realizing he was still trembling. "You should rest," she said. "I'll take the guest room." He shook his head. "You'll hear the windows rattle up there." "Stay here. It's safer." She smiled, faintly exhausted. "You sound almost human when you worry." He tried to smirk, but failed. "Don't tell anyone." She curled up on the couch nearby, the candlelight still flickering. Ethan sat on the floor, back against the wall, eyes fixed on her as her breathing steadied into sleep. The storm faded slowly, leaving only the sound of water dripping from the eaves. He stared at his hand, the one she had touched, and flexed his fingers. It didn't hurt. It felt alive. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like glass. The morning after the storm, the air over Lake Washington smelled of wet pine and renewal. Sunlight slipped between the clouds, hesitant and pale, as though afraid to disturb what the night had broken. Claire woke to the quiet hum of the generator, her head resting against the couch. The blanket she didn't remember, pulling over herself, draped neatly across her legs. When she opened her eyes, Ethan was standing by the window. Coffee in hand, his posture composed, but his eyes unfocused. He looked different, less like a fortress, more like a man who'd survived a collapse. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, voice rough with fatigue. "Not really," he said, still watching the light shift over the lake. "But I didn't wake up afraid. That's new." She smiled softly. "You should give yourself credit for that." He glanced at her. "Credit doesn't come easily to people like me. And what kind of people are you, the ones who ruin what they touch, or the ones who've only ever been taught that touch ruins things, she countered. He turned then, his eyes finding hers a flicker of surprise there. You really believe that I wouldn't be here if I didn't? The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was the kind that holds something fragile and unnamed. When she rose and joined him at the window, their reflections merged against the glass. He looked tired, unshaven human. She noticed the faint scar near his collarbone, the shadow beneath his eyes. "You're not wearing your gloves," she said quietly. "I forgot," he replied, almost surprised at himself. "That's progress," she said again. And this time he smiled, a small reluctant thing that felt earned. They spent the morning going over breathing techniques and grounding exercises, but Ethan's mind was elsewhere. She could see it in the way his fingers twitched, the way he avoided certain questions. By midday, she closed her notebook. "Something's on your mind," she said. "Say it." He didn't look at her. "You want the truth or something that sounds better on paper?" "The truth," she said. "Always." He drew a deep breath, his voice low. "I used to think I was cursed, that whatever I am, this body, this sensitivity, it was punishment for wanting too much." "Too much what connection?" he said. "When I was younger, I thought intimacy would fix me. I thought if I could just prove myself, everything wrong inside me would stop screaming. But it didn't." He swallowed, eyes glassy but steady. "The last woman I was with told me I was a freak. She said no one could ever love a man who couldn't stand to be touched without trembling." Claire's chest tightened. "That's cruelty, not truth." "It felt like both," he said quietly. "After that night, I fired everyone who'd been close enough to notice. I shut the world out. It was easier to build glass walls than admit I was still bleeding." "Ethan," she said gently, "you don't have to keep punishing yourself for someone else's inability to see you," maybe he said. "But I still see her face when I close my eyes. I still hear her laugh." Claire hesitated, then stepped closer, keeping her voice steady. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you?" He nodded almost imperceptibly. "A man who never stopped wanting to be touched the right way," she said. "That doesn't make you broken. It makes you human." He let out a shaky laugh. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," she said. "But it starts here." She gestured toward the small dining nook by the window. "Have dinner with me?" "Dinner," he repeated, startled. "I don't eat with people." "Then tonight you will." He blinked. "Are you always this persistent?" "Only with people who hide behind intellect," she said, smiling. That evening she cooked simple pasta in his pristine kitchen, humming softly while he watched from a distance. The smell of garlic and butter filled the air, clashing with the sterile perfection of the house. "When was the last time you cooked?" she asked. "College," he said, "burned everything, so you decided to become a billionaire instead. It seemed safer." She laughed quietly. The sound loosened something inside him. He poured them each a glass of wine, hands steady now. They ate slowly, the rhythm of utensils against porcelain filling the quiet. For the first time, the house didn't feel empty. It felt lived in. "You know," Claire said between bites, "you could let someone in without falling apart. You make it sound like I have a choice." "You do," she said. "That's the point." He looked at her for a long time, then said softly, "For the first time, I want someone to stay." The words hung between them, too honest to retract. Claire set her fork down, her eyes glistening, then let them. "What if it's you?" he asked. She exhaled, caught off guard. "Then you'll have to learn to see me as human too, not a cure." "I already do," he said, almost whispering. The air shifted. Outside, the wind had calmed, leaving only the faint sound of water lapping against the dock. He leaned back, studying her face in the candlelight. "You're not what I expected," he admitted. "Neither are you," she said. "That's what makes this dangerous." "Why dangerous?" "Because empathy is a slippery slope," she said. "And you're standing close to the edge." He smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the first time I've wanted to fall." She looked away, heart thudding in her chest. The line between doctor and patient blurred in that moment, not through touch but through truth. When she left later that night, the scent of dinner lingered in the air, warmth where cold once lived. Ethan followed her to the door, holding it open as rain began again outside. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not running," he said. "For seeing me." She paused, looking back at him under the soft light. "You're easier to see than you think, Ethan." When the door closed behind her, he stood there for a long while, hand pressed against the wood she'd just touched. Upstairs, he found himself unable to work, unable to sleep. Instead, he sat by the mirror again, the reflection of his face softer than he remembered. The man who stared back wasn't untouchable anymore. He looked wounded but alive. And when he whispered her name, it didn't hurt to say it. The morning after their fragile peace, the sun returned too bright, too careless, as if unaware that something delicate had been born in the dark. Ethan woke early, restless pacing between the window and the desk, as the lake shimmered in pale gold. Claire was gone, but her presence clung to the air like the faint trace of wine and rain. He hadn't touched her yet. Somehow she had touched everything. When Miles arrived for the daily briefing, Ethan was quieter than usual, distracted, answering questions with half-thoughts. "You look human today," Miles joked, unaware. "Did the doctor cure you?" Ethan's eyes flicked up sharp as a blade. "She's not a doctor to me," he said flatly. "She's a person." Miles raised a brow, sensing the shift but saying nothing. Later that afternoon, the company's public relations team called with agitation in their voices. A gossip site had published an anonymous tip, the untouchable billionaire and his secret doctor lover. There were grainy photos, Claire walking from the estate, Ethan's silhouette in the window. By evening, 3 news outlets had picked up the story, attaching it to old rumors about his condition. Words like impotence and scandal crawled across headlines like insects. Ethan's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. He ignored every call until Miles stormed in, pale and sweating. "It's everywhere," he said. "They're saying she's been living with you for weeks, that she's treating more than your nerves." Ethan's jaw tightened, the rage inside him slow and cold. "Find out who leaked it." "I already did," Miles said, looking away. "It came from inside. Someone accessed the surveillance backup from the estate." "Who, it doesn't matter," Miles muttered. "What matters is damage control." Ethan grabbed his wrist grip like steel. "Who?" Miles swallowed. "It was me." Silence fell like ice cracking. For a long moment, only the sound of distant rain filled the room. "Why?" Ethan asked quietly. "Because she's changing you," Miles snapped. "You don't see it, but everyone else does. You're softer, distracted. The board's nervous. Investors want stability, not sentiment. I did it to protect you. You did it to protect yourself," Ethan said, releasing him. "Get out, Ethan, now." The door closed with finality. Alone, Ethan sank into the chair, fingers digging into the armrest. The betrayal stung more than the headlines. For years, Miles had been the only person he trusted, and now even that illusion shattered. He turned on the TV, only to see his own face plastered across news panels. Billionaire recluse hides affair with private therapist, one anchor read aloud. Sources claim emotional breakdown. He switched it off. The silence afterward was suffocating. His phone buzzed again, Claire. He stared at her name for a long moment before answering. Her voice trembled but stayed calm. "It's all over the internet," she said. "You should have told me about your security system." "I didn't know it would happen," he said. "Miles, it doesn't matter who did," she interrupted. "The damage is done." "Claire, I'll fix this," he said. "I'll issue a statement, pay off the networks." "No," she said sharply. "You can't buy dignity." "Ethan, not mine, not yours, gay." He flinched at the words. "They'll destroy you," he said. "Then let them. I became a doctor to heal people, not to hide behind someone's wealth." "You think I wanted this," he said. "You think I wanted the world to see me as a broken experiment. I think you wanted control," she said. "And sometimes control costs more than chaos." Her voice cracked then, and he heard something rare in it, hurt. "I cared for you," she whispered. "But I can't do this if you won't trust me." "I do trust you," he said. "You're the only one I do." "Then prove it," she said softly. "Tell them the truth, not about us, about you." The line went dead before he could answer. That night, reporters camped outside his gates, their flashbulbs slicing through the fog like lightning. The mansion's glass walls, once symbols of strength, now felt like exposure. Ethan retreated to the study, pacing as rain began again, relentless. The shame he thought he'd buried rose like bile. Every whisper he'd feared now echoed through the world, defective, abnormal, unworthy. He pressed his hands against the mirror breath, fogging the glass. "You wanted to be seen," he muttered to his reflection. "Now they're all watching." He thought of Claire, how she had looked at him, not as a headline but as a man. He thought of her voice the night before, steady even when he'd broken. Somewhere inside, a truth clawed its way out. She had given him something priceless, and now the world was taking it apart, piece by piece. Hours passed. At dawn, his lawyer called to warn him that shareholders demanded an official response. He hung up without replying. Instead, he opened his laptop and began to type not a press release, but a confession. Every word felt like tearing skin, yet he kept writing. He described the years of silence, the fear of being touched, the condition that made him hate his own body. He wrote about how shame had built his empire and how one woman's empathy had started to undo it. When he finished, he read the last line aloud. "I am not untouchable. I am terrified. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise." Then he deleted it. He wasn't ready, not yet. That afternoon, he drove to the city hospital where Claire worked something he hadn't done in years. When he arrived, the lobby was chaos, reporters crowding, the entrance cameras flashing. She was in the middle of it, standing by the doors, her face pale but composed. When their eyes met across the crowd, time seemed to stutter. He moved toward her, but security stepped between them. "You shouldn't be here," she said when he finally reached her. "You'll only make it worse." "Let me talk to you," he said. "Please, not here." She turned to go, but he caught her wrist, then froze, realizing what he'd done. She did too. The world around them seemed to hold its breath. Cameras clicked. She met his eyes not with anger but sorrow. "You just proved their story," she whispered. "Now let go." He did, the moment shattering like glass between them. She walked away, leaving him surrounded by noise and light, his own reflection caught in the camera lenses of strangers. That night, back at the lake house, he stood before the shattered window, from the storm wind brushing his face. His phone buzzed again, another headline, another opinion. but he didn't read it. He whispered into the darkness, "You touched me and now everything hurts." He wasn't sure if it was accusation or gratitude, maybe both. When he closed his eyes, he could still feel her hand on his chest from that night. It didn't burn, it just ached. The week that followed felt like walking through fire. Every news outlet dissected Ethan's silence. Every commentator speculated about the truth. The words billionaire, broken, and forbidden repeated until they lost meaning. Claire had vanished from public view, retreating into her work at the hospital, refusing interviews. Ethan's lawyers drafted statements, his board demanded apologies, and his investors threatened to withdraw. Yet amid the noise, he found only one question echoing through his mind. Who am I if I keep hiding? One night after another meeting, filled with lawyers and PR strategists, he dismissed them all. The rain was steady, outside a rhythm he had come to rely on. He turned on the camera in his office, adjusted the microphone, and stared at his reflection in the lens. For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly he began to speak. "My name is Ethan Vale. I've spent my entire adult life building walls of glass and calling it strength. I thought if I controlled everything, no one could hurt me again. I was wrong. Control is just another way to stay afraid." His voice trembled, but he didn't stop. "I was born with a condition that makes physical contact painful and unpredictable. It made relationships difficult, sometimes impossible. I was ridiculed for it, exploited, and eventually I stopped letting anyone in. I convinced myself that isolation was safety, but it wasn't. It was slow death." He paused, staring down. "Recently, someone challenged that. She didn't fix me, she just refused to look away. She taught me that touch isn't always physical. Sometimes it's being seen and not turned into a headline. I'm tired of pretending I'm untouchable. I'm not broken, I'm just learning to be human again." He hit save and sent the file to every news outlet that had ever written about him. Then he turned off his phone and stepped outside into the rain. It felt cold, clean, almost kind. By morning, the video had exploded across the internet. Millions watched, thousands shared, and for the first time, empathy replaced mockery. The hashtag #TouchWithoutFear trended worldwide. People began sharing their own stories of shame, trauma, and isolation. What had begun as scandal turned into a movement. In the hospital cafeteria, Claire watched the video on a colleague's phone. She tried to stay composed, but the moment he said she refused to look away, tears blurred her vision. Her coworker nudged her gently. "Is that the same Ethan Vale everyone's talking about?" "Yes," she said quietly. "That's him. He looks different," the nurse said. "He looks real." Claire nodded, unable to speak. Later that day, she received a letter, not from Ethan, but from the hospital board. They reinstated her license, citing the public response and extraordinary professional compassion. It was victory wrapped in irony, but she took it. That evening, she stood outside the hospital, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. For the first time in weeks, she felt peace instead of exhaustion. Then a car pulled up beside her. The door opened and Ethan stepped out, dressed simply, without his usual armor of designer precision. "You shouldn't be here," she said, half smiling. "Every time you show up, my life explodes." "Then maybe it's time I start showing up for the right reasons," he said. She folded her arms. "You went public. You told me to," he said. "I didn't think you'd actually do it." "Neither did I," he admitted, "but I realized hiding wasn't protecting anyone, least of all you. You didn't have to mention me." "I didn't," he said. "Not by name. I mentioned what you did for me, which was, you made me remember. I had a heart, he said. The quiet between them was heavy but alive. So what now, she asked. You can't undo what's out there. I don't want to, he said. For the first time, I'm not ashamed of the truth. He looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. I know I hurt you. You didn't, she said softly. You just reminded me that healing someone else doesn't mean I'm healed. Then let me return the favor, he said. Let me help you heal too. She smiled faintly. You think that's how this works. I think it's a start. For a long moment they just stood there, in the glow of the street lights, the sound of the city blending with the distant rain. How did it feel? She asked finally. Telling the truth, terrifying, he said, but freeing. That's usually how it goes. People are calling it brave, he said. But it didn't feel like courage. It felt like surrender. Maybe that's what courage really is, she said. He nodded, then hesitated. Claire, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just needed you to know I finally see what you were trying to show me. And what's that? That being touched and being seen aren't the same, he said. But sometimes they can lead to the same place. She stepped closer, then close enough to see the raindrops in his hair. You really are different, she said. Or maybe you just stopped pretending. He smiled, soft and tired. Both. The sound of cameras clicking nearby made them turn. Reporters had already spotted them. She sighed. We can't seem to escape them. Then let's stop running, he said. He took her hand, not carefully, not as an experiment, but naturally. For a heartbeat, she tensed, instinctively aware of the eyes watching. But then she saw his face, calm, unafraid, at peace. He wasn't performing this time. He was choosing it. The next day, news outlets didn't call it scandal anymore. They called it redemption. The footage of Ethan's confession had inspired thousands of donations to mental health charities. His company's shares, which had plummeted now, rose higher than before. Miles was charged with data theft and quietly disappeared from headlines. The world, fickle and hungry, had turned from mockery to admiration. Yet amid the noise, Ethan and Claire stayed quiet. They met once more at the hospital courtyard, under a sky finally clear. They're calling you a hero, she teased. I'm just a man who finally stopped lying, he said. Same thing these days. He laughed softly. And you back to work, she said. I'm starting a therapy wing for patients with sensory trauma. Guess what I'm calling it? Touch without fear. He said, smiling. You like it, I love it, he said. It's what you gave me. The sun warmed the glass building's reflections, shimmering like the surface of the lake. He turned to leave, but stopped, looking back at her. You were right, he said. About what empathy is dangerous, he said. But some things are worth the risk. She watched him walk away, a faint smile touching her lips. For the first time since meeting him, she didn't feel responsible for his healing. He had found it himself, and in the quiet space he left behind, she realized something had healed in her too. The world could still be cruel, still be loud, but somewhere between fear and forgiveness, two people had learned that touch could mean salvation. The night air over Seattle carried the scent of rain and streetlights, soft and electric. Weeks had passed since Ethan's confession ignited a movement, and the world had begun to move on. Yet for him, silence no longer felt like safety. It felt like absence. He found himself driving through the city in the dark past neon reflections and wet sidewalks until he reached the small community clinic on the edge of the lake. The sign outside read, Touch Without Fear Foundation. and beneath it, in modest letters, Director Dr. Claire Monroe. Inside the building was quiet, except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of a piano playing through someone's phone speaker. He found her in one of the therapy rooms, surrounded by boxes of donated supplies. She was barefoot, her hair tied loosely, wearing an old university sweatshirt. The sight of her, the simplicity of it, stilled him. She looked up, surprise flickering into something gentler. "You shouldn't be here," she said, smiling faintly. "Every time you show up, something changes." "Maybe that's the point," he said. "No therapy tonight, just dinner." Her brow lifted. "Dinner I brought takeout," he said, holding up a bag like an offering. "Nothing fancy, just Thai food and bad decisions." She laughed softly. "You're learning." He set the food down on a folding table, pulling out 2 mismatched chairs. They ate quietly at first, the sound of rain on the windows filling the space between them. So she said finally, "How does it feel being a public symbol of vulnerability?" "Like being naked in a crowded room," he said dryly. "But it's not as terrifying as I thought." "That's because you stopped pretending you're alone," she said. "It's easier to be seen when you stop running from the mirror." "You sound like my therapist," he teased. "Occupational hazard," she said, smiling. He leaned back, studying her face. The years of exhaustion that used to live there were gone, replaced by something steadier, peace, mixed with purpose. "You rebuilt yourself," he said quietly. "We both did," she replied. "The difference is you had the money to build an empire. I just had hope." "Hope's worth more," he said. She looked at him then, and for the first time in months, the air between them felt simple again. No press, no scandal, just 2 people who had survived the same storm. When the lights flickered from the wind outside, she lit a small lamp, casting the room in golden warmth. The music on her phone shifted to a slow instrumental, almost by accident. "You still dance?" he asked. "Not since college," she said. "Why?" "Because I never learned," he admitted. "I thought tonight might be a good time to start." She laughed softly. "There's no music for that." "There is now," he said, standing and extending a hand. She hesitated, then placed hers in his. His touch was different this time, steady, unafraid. He guided her clumsily, his movements uncertain but genuine. The moment was fragile, beautiful in its imperfection. Outside rain streaked the glass, blurring the city lights into halos. "You're terrible at this," she teased. "I know," he said, "but you're still here." "That's because you finally stopped trying to lead," she said, smiling up at him. His hand moved from hers to her waist, cautious but real. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Not anymore." "Why?" "Because you finally touched back." The words came out raw, unguarded, and something in her chest tightened. They stopped moving, standing still as the rain whispered around them. For a long moment they just looked at each other, the kind of look that asks a question and answers it at the same time. When he leaned in, it wasn't urgent or hesitant, it was inevitable. The kiss was quiet, steady, human. No performance, no fear, just truth. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his. "You know this doesn't make things easier," she whispered. "I don't want easier," he said. "I just want real." She laughed softly, the sound trembling like a heartbeat. "You're impossible." "Maybe," he said, "but I'm finally impossible without the armor." They sat again, the silence between them warm. He looked around the room, posters on the walls, soft colors, little pieces of hope scattered everywhere. "You did this," he said. "You built something from what everyone else wanted to destroy." "We did," she corrected. Your name opened doors. My stubbornness kept them open. That's a good combination. Dangerous one, she said, smiling. The storm outside began to fade, leaving only a soft drizzle. She leaned back, watching him quietly. You know what I realized, she said. Healing isn't about finding someone who makes you feel whole. It's about finding someone who reminds you that you were never broken. He nodded slowly. I spent years believing I was too much, he said. Too much body, too much silence, too much fear. But maybe I was just too alone. And now, she asked. Now I think I finally let go, he said. She tilted her head. Of what? The idea that love has to hurt to be real. They sat there until the candles burned low. When it was time to leave, he helped her pack the boxes, his hands steady beside hers. Outside, the air was cold and clean. Stars faint behind the drifting clouds. You should go, she said gently. It's late. I don't want to, he admitted. Then don't, she said, surprising herself. They walked to the lake's edge, the water still and glassy. The reflection of the clinic lights rippled softly. Remember what you told me once, he asked. That you're not your condition, she said. No, he said, smiling faintly. That healing doesn't start when someone touches you. It starts when you stop pulling away. I said that you did, he said. And I finally understand it. She turned to him, her hair catching the wind. So what happens now? Now, he said quietly, we stop surviving and start living. She smiled, eyes glistening. That sounds terrifying. Good, he said. Then we're doing it right. He reached for her hand again, fingers intertwining naturally. No hesitation this time. They stood there as the night deepened, the city lights flickering like distant stars. For once, there was no need for words. The fear that had once defined him had dissolved into something simpler: trust. And when she leaned against his shoulder, he realized the thing he'd been afraid of all along wasn't touch. It was the emptiness before it. Now, with her beside him, that emptiness was gone. The rain returned soft and slow, wrapping them in quiet absolution. The man who had once been untouchable finally closed his eyes and let the world in. 1 year later, the lake looked different. The same water that once mirrored Ethan's isolation now shimmered with movement. Children feeding ducks near the dock, volunteers laughing. As they loaded supplies into small boats, the sun breaking clean across the ripples. The touch without fear foundation had grown from a whispered idea into a sanctuary for people who had forgotten what safety felt like. Inside the main building, glass walls framed the light instead of trapping it. Ethan walked down the hall with a clipboard in hand, sleeves rolled to his elbows, no gloves. His reflection in the window no longer looked like a stranger. He stopped to watch a therapy session in progress. A teenage boy flinching as a nurse gently pressed a hand to his shoulder, then exhaling when the world didn't collapse. Ethan smiled faintly. Progress was quiet but visible. Claire found him there, her white coat draped loosely, her hair pulled back. You've been up since 6, she said. Again. Habit, he replied. The board meeting's in an hour. You mean your board meeting, she teased. I just work here. You built this as much as I did, he said. More probably. She smiled but didn't argue. They walked together to the courtyard where patients sat beneath the trees, some in silence, some laughing softly. Do you ever think about how strange this is? He asked. What that a scandal turned into this? Strange, she said, but not impossible. Pain makes people listen. Healing makes them stay. He nodded. You always did find the right words. Occupational hazard, she said again, and he laughed. A moment of quiet followed, broken only by the wind moving through the leaves. You ever miss it? She asked suddenly. The noise, the power, the boardrooms. Sometimes, he admitted. Then I remember how lonely it was. Power without purpose is just isolation dressed in silk. And now, she asked. Now I wake up to something real, he said. You. The word hung there simple and unguarded. She didn't blush. She just met his gaze, eyes soft. You learned how to say that without apologizing. You taught me, he said. You taught me that love doesn't need fixing. It just needs room to exist. She stepped closer, close enough for their reflections to merge in the glass again. Do you remember the first time I came here? She asked. You wouldn't even shake my hand. And now I can't seem to stop, he said, smiling. He reached for her hand, and she didn't hesitate. Outside, one of the children pointed at them and laughed, whispering something to a nurse. Claire turned, laughing too. They think we're married, she said. Maybe one day they'll be right, he replied. Her expression softened, but she didn't pull away. They walked along the lakeside path, watching the ripples stretch toward the horizon. The media called this redemption, she said. Do you see it that way? No, he said. Redemption is about being forgiven for something you did. This feels like finally forgiving myself. The word settled between them, like sunlight through mist. In the distance, the sound of the piano drifted from one of the therapy rooms, a melody simple, human, imperfect. Do you ever get tired of talking about fear? She asked. Every day, he said, but then I remember how it felt to live inside it. She looked up at him. And now it feels like something I survived, not something that defines me. They reached the dock where the water caught the light in long silver threads. He turned to her, his voice quiet but certain. You know, I used to believe touch was the problem. And now I know it was the cure, he said. She smiled, stepping closer, until her forehead rested against his. You've come a long way, Mr. Vale. So have you, Dr. Monroe. We make a decent team, she said. The best, he whispered. A breeze rippled across the lake, warm and clean. The sky was endless, no longer pressing down on them, but opening outward. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who hid behind glass, who mistook control for peace. That man was gone, replaced by someone who had learned that fragility wasn't failure but proof of being alive. Nearby, a volunteer opened a new shipment of mirrors for therapy sessions. Ethan took one, unwrapped it carefully, and set it on a table where sunlight caught its edge. His reflection appeared for an instant before dissolving into light. What are you thinking? Claire asked. That healing isn't a finish line, he said. It's the way you walk after falling. That's poetic. You bring that out in me. She laughed, resting her head against his shoulder. They stood there until the shadows grew long, the water turning gold. When the first evening lights flickered on across the lake, she whispered, Do you ever wonder what would have happened if that storm never came? No, he said, because I wouldn't trade this version of us for any peace that kept us strangers. She smiled, eyes reflecting the last of the daylight. You always were dramatic. You make it worth being, he said. They watched the sun slip behind the horizon, the reflection burning one last moment on the surface before fading. The lake returned to calm, mirroring the sky's quiet glow. For Ethan, it was no longer glass between him and the world. It was connection, infinite and alive. He turned to Claire, their hands still entwined, and whispered, Healing doesn't begin when someone touches you. It begins when you finally stop pulling away. She smiled, eyes shining, and the world seemed to exhale with them. In that silence, every wall he'd ever built turned to light. There are stories that begin in perfection and fall apart, and there are stories like theirs born from fear, stitched together by honesty and healed by something as fragile and fierce as touch. Ethan and Claire's journey was never about wealth or scandal or redemption. It was about remembering what it means to be human in a world that teaches us to hide every flaw. If you've ever felt unworthy of being loved because of your scars, your silence, or your past, let this story be a mirror. You are not untouchable. You are simply waiting for someone who will hold your fear without trying to erase it. Love does not arrive to fix you. It arrives to stand beside you while you learn to breathe again. Somewhere tonight, another person is staring at their reflection, convinced they are too broken to be seen. Maybe they'll stumble across a story like this one and realize that being seen isn't a luxury reserved for the perfect. It's a right we're all born with. That's why stories like this matter. Because sometimes fiction becomes a map to our own healing. Ethan's glass house turned into a foundation for others, but more importantly, it became a symbol that even the coldest walls can learn to reflect warmth. Claire's belief in kindness was never loud or heroic. It was steady, human, persistent. She didn't save him. She reminded him that he could save himself. That's what love is when it's real. It doesn't rescue, it recognizes. It doesn't demand, it invites. It doesn't fix, it witnesses. If you've followed their story until now, maybe you've seen pieces of yourself in them, the part that hides the part that hopes, the part that still reaches out even when it hurts. Maybe that's the quiet magic of this world. No matter how isolated we become, stories remind us we are never truly alone. So tonight, wherever you are, whether it's a quiet apartment in the city, a farmhouse under storm clouds, or a hospital room that smells of antiseptic, pause for a moment. Look at your own reflection. Whisper to it what Ethan finally learned to say: I am not broken. I am learning to be human again. And if this story touched you, share it. Let it ripple outward the way kindness does, quietly but unstoppable. Because someone out there needs to be reminded that love worth believing in doesn't come wrapped in perfection. It comes in rain-soaked nights, trembling hands, and the courage to stay. Love doesn't wait for the unscarred. It waits for the brave. So be brave, be kind, believe again.